Hello, welcome back. And today I'm really excited for this. We're going to be covering this during Holy Week, and this should be uploaded on Good Friday. Before I begin, though, I'm going to apologize for any drop in quality. My computer over here has died, so I'm recording this through my laptop. So, just as a side, I apologize. But we are near the end of our first series here, and so I think it's appropriate to do a very short recap. We have made our mission statement, which is to love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, to love the neighbor as the self, and to deny the self, pick up the cross, and follow Him. We've covered quite a bit of ground with this statement, and we've gotten a lot of mileage out of it. And so this week is going to be the last week where we're going to cover a specific topic related to it. But before we move on to next week's wrap up, we want to come back and cover one more topic during this Holy Week. A few months ago at our church, there was a very interesting series. We had a question based series that was based entirely on questions that people in the congregation had forwarded and presented to the pastors. Now, the sermons would be dedicated to be answering multiple of these questions and even some really difficult ones. Now, one of the questions that was asked this during week 3 of that sermon series was, what happens if one is broken? Can you be forgiven? This question captured my imagination in a way. My first thought was, who asked this question and why? By no means is this a trivial question to ask. No matter what the circumstance, this person has done some things and has been through some stuff. We don't immediately know what those things were, but I don't know about you, but I could immediately relate to this idea. After thinking it over and taking a whole bunch of notes, I reached a conclusion that might seem obvious in hindsight, but could explain why I could feel like I could relate to it a bit, and maybe you can too. That some people find it easier to forgive others than it is to forgive the self. Sometimes our past can really become a stronghold. We can't let go of that which grips us. I wonder if this person was asking this question, if they were dealing with something like guilt, shame, or indebtedness that they feel like they could never truly repay. And the truth is, there is truth to that idea, because we have all fallen short and have sinned in our lifetime. But because of that stronghold, it may feel like they're never going to be able to overcome those feelings of guilt, shame, and despair. We might as well feel like we have done something so horrible and heinous that we cannot be reconciled because of it. While I was journaling this out, and even when I began scripting for this episode, I had a friend reach out to me, and we started to get to talking to one another. And we actually agreed on a lot of things, but he had a pretty good perspective that I want to also include in here. We were talking about using our past to motivate one another for a better future. Despite what we have gone through, it can fuel our motivations for good. Now, that being said, I'm going to probably delve into that more in a future episode. But sometimes that dwelling in the past, holding on to those transgressions against other people, the self, or even what how other people have hurt us, causes us to have a chip on our shoulder. Now, this phrase is used commonly, even as a good thing sometimes. I know I have used this in the past, like, oh, yeah, I got a chip on my shoulder. This is going to motivate me to do it's something that we're holding on to because we think that it is something that can work for us. Meanwhile, it's something that prevents reconciliation. Today, we're going to be looking at one of the most meaningful stories in relation to this, it being Good Friday, and what I personally connect with the story of the two criminals on the cross. These are commonly referred to as the two thieves, the penitent thief and the impenitent thief. We will refer to them as the repentant criminal and the unrepentant criminal for the sake of clarity. So let's begin at Luke 23:32 through 37. Two others, criminals, were also led away to be executed with him. When they arrived at the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on the right and one on the left. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, because they do not know what they are doing. And they divided his clothes and cast lots. The people stood watching, and even the leaders were scoffing. He saved others, Let him save himself if this is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him. They came offering him sour wine and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." We begin here to set the tone for what is about to happen. Jesus is on the cross, and the criminals are to each side of him. The crowd is mocking him. But even in the midst of that, in the midst of his suffering, Jesus says, "Father, forgive them because they do not know what they are doing." Jesus praying for those who wound him, praying for those who mock him, is a testament to God's very nature here. It's a testament to his mercy. I don't want to miss this part because even the crowd is not aware of what they are doing. We have hindsight to see this awful thing that the crowd is doing. He's extending his mercy towards the crowd this entire time, no matter what they are doing to him. It's important to note that before we move on to the next verses at 38 and 39. An inscription was above him: "This is the King of the Jews." Then one of the criminals hanging there began to yell insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." The unrepentant criminal makes his appearance here beside Jesus. On the sign there, it says, "Jesus is the King of the Jews," and it would have been perfectly obvious to who Jesus actually is. But even though the sign is right there, it wasn't obvious to whom Jesus actually was. What's remarkable about the actions of this unrepentant criminal is that he's being tortured up there, suffering the same exact fate as Jesus being executed on the cross. However, instead of his suffering being having meaning, his suffering was in vanity. He's a criminal who actually transgressed against the law, yet he's up there mocking Jesus all the same. I think it speaks to the very nature of the worst of humanity. In response to what I mentioned before, the criminal decided to use the weight of his pain, the boulder of his suffering, and he carried it with him. Now, at the end, the criminal only felt like he could be reconciled to the world, laughing and mocking with the soldiers, even though he was suffering the same exact fate. Now we turn to verses 40 to 42. But the other answered, rebuking him, "Don't you even fear God, since you are undergoing the same punishment? We are punished justly because we're getting back what we deserve for the things we did, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." I find it remarkable how much there is here. First, the criminal recognizes the folly of the unrepentant criminal by saying, "Don't you even fear God?" There is a recognition of Jesus' divine nature. In the context of the verse, there isn't a way for the repentant criminal to even understand fully what is going on here. He's in pain, he has sorrow, he has the hopelessness that he finds himself in, but he recognizes the mercy that is being extended towards him, that God is still there in the midst of the pain. Then the repentant criminal recognizes his own shortcomings, his own crimes, his own failures, but he also recognizes the innocence and the power of Jesus. But to end his remarks, he asks Jesus to remember him when he enters the kingdom. There is no mistaking what this is. This is a broken man asking if there is any way for him to be forgiven. This is a condemned criminal, just as all of us stand condemned by our own sins. But he sees something greater than himself, an innocent man who is condemned next to him. In asking for him to remember him when he comes into his kingdom, there must be a recognition that this is not just an established kingdom on earth. This is a recognition of who Jesus is, as God's kingdom is greater than the one on earth. Jesus answers him in verse 43. And he said to him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." This right here is the perfect articulation of grace, as Jesus speaks with kingly authority that this is a redeemed man that has been reconciled. The significance of this is that no matter how awful things are, no matter what we have done, and even where we are now, Jesus has the authority to give us grace. that he can save us through faith, even for a criminal on the cross. What is grace? In short, it's unmerited favor. We do not deserve the gift that God has given for us, but he also extends his mercy and his grace to us despite what wrong we have done. Because of his sacrifice on the cross, we are able to reconcile ourselves to God and to have a relationship with him. This is a free gift that he offers for every single one of us. There's also one more thing with grace that we need to mention here, and that is that grace is also empowerment. Once we accept his free gift, which he offers from a point of authority, we are empowered to do what he wills for us. For grace isn't a permissive license for our will to be done, but for his. His empowerment allows us to work with him and allows his work to be done within us. Grace empowers us to reconcile us to him no matter how broken and no matter what we have done. So long as we still live and breathe, we can be reconciled to him through grace. Grace is what emboldens us to forgive others as well as to forgive ourselves. Just as he has rolled the stone away from the tomb, he can roll away the burden that we put on ourselves, and he can remove the chip from our shoulders, and he can remove that which weighs us down, but only if we choose him in faith. Despite dying on a criminal's cross as a sin bearer and dying for us, he rose from the dead to glory on Easter Sunday. He has risen. So, with that being said, I'm going to be really excited for next week as we close this out. And until then, God bless and have a wonderful Easter.